It is a strange paradox, isn't it? We spend months planning these dream vacations to relax, to escape, to decompress, but the actual gateway to that relaxation, the airport, is often one of the most high-stress environments on the planet. It's a place of high stakes, rigid rules, and a very specific, almost militaristic type of language.
It really is, and it's not just about the logistics of making a flight. It's about entering a space that anthropologists like Marc Auger famously called a non-place. It's a transient zone where your identity is stripped down to a barcode on a boarding pass. And to navigate that non-place successfully, especially in a foreign country, you have to master a very specific dialect. We often call it airport English, but it's really a mix of technical jargon, legal speak, and rapid-fire imperatives.
That concept of the non-place is fascinating. It's this idea that you aren't really in a country yet, you're just in the process of travel. And today, we are going to dissect that process. We're taking the listener's request to break down the language of air travel, but we're going to go deeper than just a phrasebook. We're going to look at the psychology behind the interactions at check-in, security, the gate, and the terrifying final boss that is immigration.
We are, and we should probably start with a bit of context on why English is even the default here. It's not accidental. It goes back to the Chicago Convention of 1944 and the establishment of the ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. They eventually standardized English as the language of aviation safety, so whether you are in Tokyo, Berlin, or Rio, the pilots and controllers are speaking English. That standardization trickled down into the terminal itself.
So when we feel that pressure to speak English at a counter in a non-English speaking country, it's actually a remnant of post-war international policy. That sets the stage perfectly. Let's walk through this journey chronologically. Zone 1, the check-in desk. This is the first impression. You walk up, maybe you're a bit anxious about your bag weight. What is the dynamic here?
The dynamic is efficiency versus reassurance. The agent has likely seen hundreds of people. They are tired, they want to process you and move on. The traveler, however, wants to know their bag is safe and they have a seat. So the language here is transactional. You need to preempt their questions. Instead of waiting to be asked, you approach with, "Here's my passport, I've checked in online, but I need to drop off my bags."
Right, you're establishing competence immediately. But then come the hurdles, the luggage. I feel like this is where the vocabulary gets tricky for people, specifically the difference between carry-on, checked baggage, and the dreaded excess baggage.
Exactly, and there is a specific phrase that is an absolute lifesaver if you have a connecting flight. Let's say you're flying New York to London to Dubai. You do not want to be standing at the carousel in Heathrow looking for your bag. You need to ask, is my luggage checked through to my final destination?
Checked through. That phrasal verb is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. It implies the entire logistical transfer between aircraft.
Precisely. If you don't use that phrase, you might get a vague yes that refers only to the first leg. You have to be specific. And while we are at the counter, we have to talk about the fragile sticker. If you're traveling with a guitar or, say, bringing a bottle of olive oil back from Italy, you need to advocate for that item. Could you place a fragile sticker on this, please? It's a simple request, but it changes how the baggage handlers, in theory, treat the object.
In theory being the operative phrase there. Okay, so we've dropped the bags, we have the boarding pass. Now we move to what is arguably the most stressful part of the entire experience. Zone 2, security. The vibe shifts completely here. The smiles are gone, the customer service voice disappears.
It does. This is where we enter the realm of the imperative. In linguistics, the imperative mood is used for commands. Security officers don't use softeners like could you or please. They say shoes off, laptops out, empty your pockets. It can feel aggressive, but it's designed for speed and compliance. They need you to move.
It feels like a military operation because since the formation of the TSA in the US and similar bodies globally post 9/11, it essentially is one. There's a vocabulary mismatch that often happens here too. I've seen tourists look completely bewildered when an officer yells, "Put it in the bin."
Yes, that's a classic dialect difference. In American English, it's a bin. In British or Commonwealth English, it's a tray. If you're in London and asking for a bin, they might think you're looking for a trash can. So context matters. And then there's the physical search. If the metal detector beeps, you need to know the term pat down. It's intrusive, but it's standard procedure. The correct response isn't to argue. It's just a neutral, sure, no problem.
It's interesting how we have to perform a sort of harmlessness in that cue. We modulate our behavior to look as unthreatening as possible. So we survive security, we put our belts back on, we enter the air side, duty-free, restaurants, the waiting game. Zone 3, the gate. This seems passive, but I'd argue it requires the highest level of listening comprehension.
I agree completely. Airport acoustics are notoriously terrible. High ceilings, glass walls, constant echoes. You have to filter out the noise and listen for key words. You aren't listening for full sentences. You are listening for Flight 402, boarding, delayed, or the most dangerous one, gate change.
That gate change announcement is often the only warning you get before you miss your flight. It's rarely repeated clearly. And there's another term that travelers need to be aware of, which sounds almost criminal, but is standard airline practice: overbooked.
Right. Airlines statistically predict that a certain percentage of people won't show up, so they sell more tickets than seats. When everyone shows up, you get bumping. You might hear an announcement asking for volunteers to take a later flight in exchange for travel vouchers. If you understand that offer, it can actually be a huge win. You could get hundreds of dollars in credit just for waiting 3 hours, but you have to understand what they're asking.
So the savvy traveler hears overbooked and hears opportunity, while the confused traveler hears problem. That's a key distinction. Let's get on the plane, Zone 4. We are in the tube. The social contract changes again. Now we are back to customer service, but we are also in a very tight shared space with strangers. Etiquette becomes paramount.
This is where softeners come back into play. You cannot use the imperative here. You can't say, "Give me water." You have to use modal verbs. Could I have some water? Would you mind? If the person in front of you crushes your knees by reclining their seat, you don't say, "Move your seat." You say, "Excuse me, sorry, would you mind moving your seat up just a little bit?"
It's that triple padding technique. Excuse me plus sorry plus would you mind. We layer these polite phrases to de-escalate potential conflict because we're trapped in a metal tube at 30,000 feet. You can't walk away from an argument.
Exactly. And for requests to the flight attendants, vocabulary precision helps. Asking for spare headphones implies you know they might not have them, but you're asking for a favor. It's polite. Or asking for water without ice. It's about making their job easier by being clear.
Okay, fast forward, the flight lands. You're exhausted, dehydrated, and now you face Zone 5, immigration, the border control. I called this the final boss earlier because the power dynamic is incredibly lopsided. The officer has total authority to deny you entry. This is not the time for jokes.
Absolutely no jokes and no storytelling. This is where people go wrong. They get nervous and start babbling. When the officer asks, "What is the nature of your visit?" they don't want to hear about your cousin's wedding or the museum you plan to see. They want a category. The correct answer is tourism, business, or visiting family. Short, precise, categorized.
It's almost like a legal deposition. You answer only the question asked. If they ask, "How long are you staying?" you don't say, "Well, I might leave on Tuesday, but maybe Wednesday." You say 12 days or until the 30th.
Consistency is what they are looking for. If your verbal answer matches the date on your return ticket, you're fine. If you hesitate or get vague, that triggers their training to investigate further. And always, always have the documents ready. When they ask, "Do you have a return ticket?" saying, "It's somewhere in my phone, hang on," creates tension. Having it printed or immediately on screen says, "I am a prepared, low-risk traveler."
There is one last question they usually ask, which trips people up. Do you have anything to declare? This sounds so dramatic, like something out of an 18th century smuggling novel.
It does, but it refers to very mundane things: alcohol, tobacco, large amounts of cash, or agricultural products. Different countries have different biosecurity rules. Australia and New Zealand are incredibly strict about food, for example. If you have nothing, the phrase is simply nothing to declare. If you aren't sure, it is always better to declare it. The fine for lying is much worse than the inconvenience of throwing away an apple.
So we pass the test, we get the stamp and the passport, we walk through the sliding doors to Zone 6, baggage claim. Usually this is just waiting, but sometimes the belt stops and your bag isn't there. This is the moment of panic.
Panic helps nothing. You need to locate the baggage service office, or lost and found. And you need to know two terms here. First, the baggage claim tag, that little sticker they stuck to your passport or boarding pass back in Zone 1, that is your receipt. Without that, you have no proof.
I've seen people throw that sticker away the moment they clear security, thinking they don't need it. Big mistake.
Huge mistake. And the second term is the Property Irregularity Report, or PIR. That is the official form you file when a bag is lost. It sounds bureaucratic and scary, but you need to ask, do I need to fill out a property irregularity report? Using that specific terminology shows the agent you know the process. You aren't just a confused tourist. You are an informed passenger holding them accountable.
And that really sums up the theme of this entire episode, doesn't it? The difference between a stressful trip and a smooth one often isn't about the airline or the weather. It's about your ability to use language to assert control over the situation. When you know the terms, checked through, gate change, property irregularity report, you stop being a passive package being moved around the world, and you become an active participant in your journey.
That's it. Knowledge reduces anxiety. When you understand the script that the airport staff is following, you can play your role perfectly. You can anticipate the cues. You become the pro traveler we talked about at the beginning.
So, for everyone listening who has a flight coming up, or maybe just dreams of one, don't just pack your suitcase. Pack your vocabulary. Review these phrases, visualize the interaction at the counter. It makes a world of difference.
And a little homework for the listeners. Next time you watch a movie with a travel scene, something like The Terminal or Up in the Air, listen closely to the background announcements and the dialogue at the desks. See if you can catch the specific phrasing we talked about today. It's everywhere once you start noticing it.
I love that. Turn movie night into a study session. Thank you so much for breaking this down with us today. It's made me almost look forward to my next security pat-down. Almost.
Let's not go that far, but safe travels to everyone out there. Keep your documents ready and your English sharp.
If you found this survival kit useful, send this episode to that friend who always panics at the check-in desk. You know the one.